At Edgewater Systems, we don't believe in this is as good as it gets. In fact, we believe that as good as it gets can get even better. We don't believe that mental illness is a dead-end street. We do believe that there is a path to recovery and balance in life. I'm Dr. Danita Johnson Hughes, and tonight I'm here to share with you some truths about mental illness and how it impacts all of our lives. By the end of tonight's presentation, you will feel that you too can make as good as it gets even better for the many mentally ill individuals in Gary and Northwest Indiana. Let's face it, mental illness gets a bad rap. From being the brunt of jokes on sitcoms to the private jokes about crazy family members. Mental illness even gets the blame for every person who's ever gone postal in the country. Mental illness has either been ignored or blamed for every tragedy that has occurred in our country. And here's the truth. Yes, people who commit those atrocities are probably mentally ill. Why else would they do what they do? But let me tell you, people with mental illness are most often the victims of crime. Did you know that 1 in 5 people will experience a mental illness in their lifetime? And I'm not talking about just an emotional problem or a concern. I'm talking about a diagnosable mental illness. 1 in 5. Look around. Look at the 4 people close to you. Don't laugh. It could be you. These illnesses run the gamut, from mildly to severely disabling. At Edgewater, we see the broad spectrum of these illnesses, from mild anxiety to drug dependence to severe family dysfunction. Now let's be honest. Raise your hand if you don't have a dysfunctional family at some level. Edgewater helps people in the trenches of dysfunction to develop the coping skills and appropriate behaviors to meld into a well-functioning family. Now, I know firsthand what it feels like to need someone to be there to support you when your family life is falling apart all around you. My first grade teacher was Mrs. Kaufman. And as the 6-year-old, Mrs. Kaufman would often allow me to stay after school to grade papers for her. And for that, she'd pay me a nice, shiny dime. And you know you can buy a lot of penny candy with a dime. Well, one day, Mrs. Kaufman comes to me after school, and she has a box in her hand. And she goes, "Danita, these are a pair of shoes that my niece has worn, but they're too small for her, so I'd like for you to have them." So as she hands me the box and I take the box from her hands, I flip open the lid. I knew in my 6-year-old mind that those shoes were brand new. You see, Mrs. Kaufman had found a way to make as good as it gets even better for a 6-year-old child who needed a little extra attention. Edgewater System serves approximately 4,000 people a year. Over the 39 years that we've been in business, we've served over 150,000 individuals and families. These people have walked through our doors looking for help and hope. Now just think about that. 150,000 people. That's about the population of the city of Gary, the town of Maryville, Hobart, and East Chicago. That's a lot of people. I'm often asked, why do you do this work? And I tell people that I like seeing people's lives change. I like seeing people's lives change for the better. What's even better than actually being able to see and feel the change is to have someone come up to you and tell you how beneficial the services have been for them and their families. Once I was in a grocery store, and a lady walks up to me, and she goes, "You're Dr. Hughes. You work at Edgewater, don't you?" I reluctantly said, "Yes." Never know what to expect. And all of a sudden, her face lit up, and she goes, "My son went to Edgewater," and she points over to her son. His name was Eric. And she said, "Eric went to Edgewater, and he got kicked out of public school because of his behavior." So I'm looking over at Eric. Eric's about 6'2", about 185 pounds. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I could see how Eric could be very intimidating to his teacher. So she goes on to tell me this story. And she says that at Edgewater, Eric received all the help he needed. He saw therapists, he saw teachers. They helped him to learn how to structure his behavior so that he could get along well in the classroom. Eric went back to a regular classroom, and he eventually graduated from high school. It's nice to say you work someplace that helps people. It's even nicer when you can see the change. Think about it. Eric's mother thought that Eric's behavior and lack of control was as good as it gets. At Edgewater, we made as good as it gets better for Eric, his mom, and his teacher. But most importantly, we made as good as it gets better for Eric's future. Not only does Edgewater serve individuals and families, it serves you, our community and business leaders. As community and business leaders, none of us are untouched by mental illness. Now, how many of you have known someone at the workplace who is doing a good job, or a family member that has a lot of potential, and then all of a sudden, they got on the wrong bus? We've all seen it. It happens more often than we care to admit, but because of the stigma attached to mental illness, we often don't care to talk about it. The National Alliance on Mental Health reports that depression is the most common illness in the workplace. It affects about 1 in 10 employees. The report also states that mental illness causes more days of lost work and work impairment than chronic health conditions such as diabetes, asthma, arthritis, hypertension, back pain, and even heart disease. The annual economic indirect cost of mental illness is estimated to be about $79 billion. Yes, you heard it right, $79 billion. And most of it, about $63 billion of it, reflects the cost of lost productivity. A sick mind is no different than a sick body. Now, I'm from a family of good church-going folk. And you know church folk, they pray about everything. Right, Reverend? Now, back in the day, if I were to tell my mother I was depressed and was thinking about committing suicide, she'd say, "Just pray about it, baby." But just like a person can't pray away a broken arm, you cannot pray away a broken mind. A broken mind needs treatment. In our steering committee meeting the other day, Janelle St. John comes bouncing into the office, into the meeting, and she's just so excited. There she is over there. And Janelle starts talking about, you know, mental illness and mental health, they're receiving a lot of media attention this week. And I thought about it. Last week was Mental Health Awareness Week, and I had seen a few of those segments. On Tuesday, they featured this young man, Kevin Brill. Kevin is now 20 years old. At 17 in high school, Kevin was a very popular student. He was a standout basketball player, and everybody just loved him. But Kevin suffered from depression. And Kevin goes on to tell this story about how one day when he was about to commit suicide and he was sitting on his bed, a place that he sat many times before, and he's writing out his suicide note. And as he gets down to the end, he thinks to himself, and he says, you know, I've never talked to anybody about this. I've never even asked for help. Maybe, just maybe, I should ask for help. And he did. On Wednesday, they featured Brandon Marshall. Now, Brandon, y'all might know, is a Chicago Bear. Brandon is living with borderline personality disorder. Brandon talks about how if it had not been for his wife, who encouraged him to seek treatment, he doesn't know where he would be today. He is now an advocate and a voice for the mentally ill. For some people, sitting alone in isolation or despair is as good as it gets. But because of stories like these, and those of the many people who walk through the doors at Edgewater Systems, we believe as good as it gets can get better, and that we can help these people along their journey. As employees, bosses, community leaders, your success can be directly related to the mental health of the people you work with and serve. With the predominance of mental illness so high in the workplace, make sure that you are providing the support and resources to the people who need it most and are the most reluctant to ask. Not only will employee absenteeism go down, productivity will go up, and you know, that's a good business plan. Our Hebrew ancestors believed in a phrase, tikkun olam, tikkun olam. They believed this to be a directive from God. Tikkun olam means repair the world. You know, there are a lot of problems out there in the world, and the problems are too massive for any one person to fix. But what you can do is take the time to repair our little corner of the world right here in Northwest Indiana.